oppression. But is there any documented evidence that you know about?
Yeah, there are records I mentioned.
The reason I'm trying to understand somewhat the basis of what has, the fact that much has not come down systematically, it seems that there must have been some effort to annihilate the cultural expression in St. Vincent and in
Yeah, there are records. There is anthropologist, I hope I'm calling it right, Charles Willick, who as a young postgrad I was in continuous contact with. He has spent his entire lifetime doing research on this aspect. I myself, as a person who have been concerned primarily with political economy, because I'm a political historian. Yes, I'm into cultural studies, but there are some certain aspects, for example, unlike Dr. Honeychurch, who has dealt with issues around landscape and forestry and fauna, I have not spent a lot of time on that. So from the point of view of politics, I would say to you that they appear in the record from time to time. In fact, one of the defining movements, I would say, in modern time was two defining movements that I've found. The first one is when Ivy Joshua entered politics and how Ivy Joshua used Arabs, quote unquote, as a constituency, right? And it is my assessment that it is through this constituency that she was able to remain in power for such a long time. But that changed with the coming on of, what is his name, Valentine? What's his name again? Peter Valentine, yes. It swung with Peter Valentine because for the first time, you have one of their own emerging. And you will see the tradition continuing right now up with Montgomery Daniel, right? Which is one of the challenges. So that political aspect. The other part is around the land. Because the land, and Dr. Fraser spent a lot of time on this, a lot of time on this. Land is the defining factor of a people. From the period we're dealing with right up until adult suffrage students, up until 1951. Land defines who you are. So if you didn't have land, you couldn't vote. If you didn't have land, you couldn't own a living and so on. Of course, we're in the 21st century, you don't have to own land. You just have to be able to earn an income and then you could pay and so on. So I've used the example of 1902, Loyola, where we have a lot of documents because there was, I don't think it's a commission of inquiry, but there was this concern by the colonial authorities. So what they did, when they have a matter which they're very concerned with, they take all of the documents and they compile them. So you can get, for example, the documents surrounding the 1902 eruption and the efforts to relocate persons from up in the hills from the lands that were given after the end of the deportation, the exile, whatever terms you want to use, right? But yes, there is sufficient documents because as historians of the region, we rely heavily on what you call the colonial dispatches. And this is for the sake of the students, I'm explaining. What happens, students? You would have in St. Vincent what you call an administrator. The administrator would be the equivalent to the modern day prime minister in terms of what they do. The administrator would be based at Government House, would correspond almost daily to the governor who was based in Grenada. So Grenada was like the headquarters and we were a part of the headquarters. And this issue again caused a lot of trouble. Certainly if you go to the National Archives or library, you'll find several issues I've written around this. And from Grenada, they would send the information up to London. So in London, there's a place now called the Public Records Office. Sorry, now called the National Archives, it used to be called the Public Records Office, where we have all of this correspondence. So I would say for you, for example, I was in Kew recently, and I got to realize that our late Prime Minister, Robert Milton Keynes, was once shot in his buttocks out of California and disappeared for weeks. And Joshua was saying he got shot because he interfered people and he needs to give up the government. Things like that, right? So you could go even up to today and read what Barnum Camp used to write and Mike Brown used to write. No, Mike came after. Mike came on the heel of independence, up until 1969. So I hope that answers your question, Zola. So the point is that if there's anything you wish to research in relation to that period, we rely heavily on those documents. I don't know if Adrian wants to add anything, Dr. Fraser, in relation to the limits.
Apart from the actual documentation, one of the things on which you get a lot of information is that a number of businesses in Vincent, including the magistrates, one of the things they always try to do is to visit what they call the Arab communities and left really a lot of information about what is taking place there. So apart from those others, the daily correspondence between the administrator and governor. And in fact, one of the things I found very interesting is that the people in England were always asking the administrators in St. Vincent to give them an accurate account of the number of carriers existing, because they just vary from year to year and confuse the people in how many people are really needed. So there's really quite a lot of information you can find.
Yeah, Charles Taylor, his book, there's an appendix that shows you the number of black carrots, yellow carrots, quote unquote, each period. Charles Taylor. Google it and you'll find Charles Taylor.
This will be the last question. Well, we have two questions.
Okay, my question, Mr. Scott, a lot of us here don't know a lot about the range of the situation. So,
sorry, repeat.
A lot of us here don't know about the rangers that you were talking about. So we're wondering to give us some background information on that.
The what? Rangers. Oh, the St. Vincent Rangers. Okay. I will send it to your teacher, but for the sake of everybody, there was a policy the British used globally called rule and divide. And as part of that policy, you get your friends. So let's say you have two friends and your teacher wants to get you in trouble. Your teacher just choose one friend and say that you told her that you did something wrong. And then she, what do you use of stitch? She snitched and confessed. Switch, snitch, right? And confess and so on. So the British use that globally. In fact, they started here in the Caribbean and tested a lot of things and they took it to Africa. So one of the things they did is, if you know the best fighters are people of African descent, and these soldiers are being beaten by the black Caribs, by the Garifuna, they put together this army who are compiled of persons who are actually slaves. So your master would say to you, listen, we want to put you in the St. Vincent Ranger. If you go and beat the black Caribs, when you are finished, you get your freedom. What would you do? Some of us might say, well, like Hathaway, Alvarado born in here. And some of us will say, well, freedom? Now go ahead. That's cool. Right? So after the war was finished, the Rangers was incorporated into what we call the West India Regiment, the West India Regiment, the first West India Regiment, which continued right up until the First World War. And they went off to Italy and so on to fight. And it was the First World War, those people coming back, who became the first people to recognize that white people were not invincible. White people could drop down, white people, quote unquote, they're foolish too, like we. And it is these people who came back and created a lot of confusion. I will give something to your teacher, and you can read about what happened in St. Vincent when they came back and the banned carnival, because you heard that these fellows who went to Italy was going to create a war in town and so on. Right? So from the St. Vincent Rangers right up to the 1st West Indian Regiment, then we had the 2nd West Indian Regiment, First World War, then we go into the Second World War again, when you have people like Milton Cato who went on, but he didn't go to the West Indian Regiment, he went to Canada and so on. Right? So when we have Memorial Day Parade, that is why all of us need to go there. Not because we are happy that all people went and fight for white, quote unquote, or the colonialists, but because it is through this process that we are able to be independent today. 1770 something. I can't remember exactly. First and second, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. In your presentation, you spoke about oral history,
Yeah.
heritage, language. I'm wondering, do you know if anyone has given a consideration to the idea of introducing, or perhaps I should say reintroducing the Garifuna language in St. Vincent? And I'm also wondering, and maybe other people can chime in on this, do we see the value in introducing this Garifuna language here in St. Vincent at any level, perhaps primary, tertiary, or general?
That's a question for the Garifuna Heritage Foundation.
Well, I can just comment on that. There, in the Garifuna language, there have been some, thought has been given to developing projects, and some initiatives have taken place in the past. There have been persons who have come to St. Vincent and the Grenadines and given classes, but people from Belize have come and given lessons on the Garifuna language here in the past, over the past couple of years. But these efforts have been sporadic, and learning a language requires a more methodical process, so it hasn't really taken root. I know that the most recent initiative includes one that is done by the Garifuna group, that is Ms. Trish taken out of New York. She comes as on an annual basis, and for the past 3-4 years, and has done summer camps for children, young people in location. Barely was the most recent, and I believe some of her students are here in this room today. Mr. Mars is an associate of that program, and they include learning the dance and the language. That includes learning the dance and the language. So but those are really the short-term initiatives. In terms of a long-term, more systematic process of introducing the language, it has been discussed. There are pros and cons, but there have been no real initiatives. So to answer your question, I think that is an important discussion that needs to take place in the country. At the level of the foundation, we believe it is important to introduce the language at least in a more systematic way, but we so far have not yet come up with the resources to conduct a program which would allow more long-term teaching of the language here, because it requires either trainers, resources. We have thought about the web, the internet, online learning, but so far that has not yet come to fruition.